What's up, y'all? DT2 Comics Chat here with my solo review of The Flash. Now, by solo, I mean this is just me. I'm going to do a group review later, but I have so much to say about this film and it's so fresh, I have to say it right now while I'm thinking about it. If I could sum up this movie in one word, that word would be desperate. This movie is desperate for us to like it, desperate for us to laugh at its sorely misplaced humor, desperate for us to forget the troubled situations that Ezra Miller, its star, has been in. And there's actually 3 of him in this movie. And they just want us to gloss over that, especially when we see how other people, other actors that have been accused, not tried and convicted, but just accused of certain things, how they have been treated versus how he's been treated. It's desperate to use nostalgia to make us think that it's better than it is just because it has tons of popular cameos. And this movie is desperate to make money, and you can see that audiences are rejecting it. But that's not just geek audiences, because longtime geeks or longtime comic book fans don't make up enough of an audience to pass the multi-million-dollar mark or the billion-dollar mark, as is now expected of superhero films. So you can see with the box office connected to this film that even normies, even people that just want to go enjoy a superhero film, are turning out for this movie, and there's several reasons for that. One of the reasons is the off-screen behavior of its star. If you're not familiar with what Ezra Miller's been doing for the past several years, then Google him. Another problem that this movie has in terms of why it's tanking is because James Gunn, when he took over, should have finished supporting the movies yet to be released before he started announcing the next phase of DC movies, before he started announcing casting and all that, because it just makes people not care. This is the end of the Snyderverse. Make no mistake. This is the end of the universe that Zack Snyder created. You know, Shazam 2 didn't do well. Black Adam didn't do well. We still got Aquaman 2 to come out, and it too has a troubled co-star with Amber Heard. If you're not familiar with what Amber Heard has done and her relationship with Johnny Depp, Google it. You'll see. You can't miss it. And then we've got Blue Beetle. So with these movies left, and on a totally ironic note, the Flash movie, this one, was announced for the first season of the Flash CW. That's right. The first year we met Grant Gustin on the Flash CW, that's when this movie was announced. And so it's ironic that as the Flash CW has wrapped, and we've had the series finale, now this movie drops. That's how long it's been in production hell. And it shows. And finally, we've got a movie doing the thing that poor movies always do: obfuscation and distraction. They try to distract you so much with winks and cameos and nostalgia to cover up a poor story or no story. Because even without all that, the movie ought to be able to stand on its own, and it really doesn't. So we're going to go element by element through this desperate movie. First off, the casting. The biggest problem is the main star, Ezra Miller. Google his troubles and see what he's been doing off screen. You'll see it, okay? You can't miss it. So if you don't like Ezra Miller, that's all you're going to get in this film is Ezra, and more Ezra. Michael Keaton completely steals this movie. It's a shame he had to make his big screen return as Batman in a film like this. He is full Batman by the time the film is over. Iris West is black again, the new 52 Iris West, and once again, nothing is added to her character. When she first meets Barry, she Lois Lanes him. She flirts with him to pretend that she likes him, but she's actually trying to get a statement and an interview. Then later on in the film, she asks for a legit date. I would have been done with her as soon as she did that bait and switch on me, but that's just me. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed Sasha Calle for what we saw of her. She is sorely underdeveloped. Now, I'm a lover of the traditional Kara Zor-El, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed cousin of Kal-El, and everybody that knows me knows that. Given the context of this film, they explain why Sasha Calle is dark-haired. She still would have been better as Laura Lane Kent. She's a dead ringer for the future daughter of Superman and Lois. That would have been the perfect fit for her. But she serves her function in this film, and she serves it well, but she's not developed. She spends her entire screen time literally reacting to everything. So we only get a few minutes of exposition about who she is, what she remembers. You know, it's poignant and it's moving, and she delivers the lines well, but just not enough time with her to really connect the way that they want us to. And spoiler alert, she dies. She dies in the film, and then it becomes a fixed point meaning they can't bring her back. Flash's mom, Nora Allen, in this film is played by Maribel Verdú, really famous Spanish actress. She was in Pan's Labyrinth and Y Tu Mama Tambien. But I don't think what they realized, what making Flash half Hispanic does, it completely changes the character. You know, I'm normally for traditional characters, but there definitely are some situations where less traditional characters or alternative versions of the characters actually do work. But here, you know, we've never had a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Barry Allen. That has always bothered me. But once you make Flash half Spanish, do you realize the cultural traditions, bilingual nature, holidays on the calendar, the diet, and the way the impact of your dual heritage would carry across every aspect of your life. And we don't even really get to explore the cultural implications of Barry being mixed. If you're going to race swap, it needs to be relevant to the story that you're telling, and you need to take full advantage of that change. None of that happens here. We see Ron Livingston play Barry's dad in this film, and he does an adequate job. The plot of this film is not just Flashpoint. Now, for those of you that don't read the comics, there was a comic called Flashpoint where basically Barry went back in time to prevent his mom's death. That was the crux of the Flash CW. The entire story world was built around that event. There's been an animated movie. What they don't explain adequately, even though Thawne does do it in the books, Thawne basically says that Barry changed the world because his time travel methods were sloppy. He went back in time so quickly, he shattered the timelines, he shattered reality, because it seems that reality is always fragile in sci-fi movies and that everything that happened is Barry's fault. But you know what they never address? They never address the fact that Thawne went back in time to kill Nora. That wasn't supposed to happen. And they do the same thing on the Flash CW. They do that thing that I hate called fixed points in time, because there's no such thing. If we're going to get into time travel, there's no such thing as fixed points in time where you can't change it. That doesn't even make any sense. If the whole premise is that you went back to alter things and other things can be altered, but they always do some dumb stuff like that, and I reject the notion completely. Thawne going back in time to kill Nora was not supposed to happen. They were just trying to make Barry Allen a more tragic, a more sad sack, a more dour figure, because today's writers hate anything that's happy, anything that's bright, anything that's positive. Because if you actually read a comic, you would know that the Flashes are the happiest family in DC. They're just a great superhero family that have proven for decades you don't have to be motivated by tragedy. And today's writers can't stand that. And on top of that, Ezra Miller's Barry Allen has been written from the beginning like Peter Parker. So not only is this a Barry motivated by tragedy, he's written as someone that has to lose. He's nothing like Barry Allen from the comics. He's just this nerdy, quirky, awkward, mousy, nervous kind of individual. And he's nothing like any version of Barry Allen that we've ever known. They also mix in with the Flashpoint plot, Red Flash and Black Flash. The Red Flash wink is when Barry turns the Bat costume into a Flash costume, which looks awful. And also they introduce Black Flash. It's the avatar of death for speedsters. What happens at the heart of this film is that our Barry has to convince his younger self that's 18 and just recently received his powers that you actually can't continually go back in time over and over and over again to keep fixing your mistakes and keep getting a reset. But younger Barry doesn't listen to that. He doesn't believe that. And in the process becomes stuck in a time loop where he keeps going back and keeps going back and keeps going back, but never quite gets it right. You can see the scars on his face. You see his mask crumble. You see that it's him. You see that his suit has become a conglomeration of all the impact of all that time travel, plus the crosshatched Flash suit he made out of Batman's uniform, plus some of the damage he suffered in the battle with Zod in terms of his metal spear. So again, there are 3 Ezra Miller Flash characters in this film. And so we don't get to see the Atlantean Amazonian war between Aquaman and Wonder Woman. There's a lot that is missing, which is normally what happens when you get multiverse movies, because they don't read the comics and they don't really know the comics. They think they can take a pork chop, sew it onto a chicken, then call it a chicken wing. Plus, you know how it's going to end, because there's only one way it can end. and Barry's going to have to go back and let his mother die, and we have to watch that whole thing again. So he goes through dealing with the entire ramifications of time travel in this film very, very quickly, and comes to his conclusion very, very quickly. So we don't even spend enough time with him learning the ways of time travel, learning the mistakes of time travel, learning the moral implications of time travel. We don't spend enough time. We get it, but it goes by really, really fast. And so it doesn't have enough time to really sink in like it should. I'm tired of seeing that. He's not Batman. He's not Peter Parker. I guess they still don't get that. The cinematography was really not bad. For once, it wasn't really dark and dour, at least not most of the time. There's a couple of scenes that are so dark you can't really fully make out what's going on, but it doesn't have that blue, overcast, heavy, bluish gray pall on it for once. The look of the film is clean enough more often than not for you to follow what's going on. So at least I have to give it points on that. The running is the worst running I've ever seen of any kind of Flash thing. His running is so awkward, and Ezra Miller said he studied athletes, he studied runners. I'm like, which ones did you study? Maybe Road Runner you studied. He's so awkward, and then when he's time traveling, he's actually running backwards. I mean, it was one of the most bizarre depictions of time travel I think I've ever seen. You're not supposed to have a version of the Flash where you hate to watch him run. Just let that hit. They did this thing that was also really ridiculous. It was saying that when he gets too hungry, he loses his speed, he slows down, he can't move as fast as he needs to. Even the way he saves the babies from the maternity ward and the nurse that's falling is so ridiculous. So his running and his rescues are just really, really kind of head scratching. He kind of accidentally stumbles onto the idea that he can time travel, which is another kind of ridiculous thing. So he gets so upset after what happens, he just emotionally lashes out, and then he starts running so fast, he begins to time travel, and then he goes back a day, and then he says, well, I can go back further, and then that's what causes this whole mess. The future Black Flash, which is young Barry, pushes him out of the time stream so that he meets his 18-year-old self. Barry helps his younger self be there for the accident that gives him his powers, but because he's standing in the way, it gives 18-year-old Barry his powers, but it takes away the powers of our Barry. So now he's powerless, and his younger self is just going crazy. He's so immature. He's got this ridiculously dorky laugh, like he's grunting. He does try to explain to his younger self about what to do, but his younger self has instant power mastery after having his powers literally for just hours. Meeting yourself in the past ought to break every time travel fabric of reality, existential, universal, multiverse rule that there is. Not only does he meet himself, he grabs himself, he shakes himself, he's about to punch himself. He interacts with his friends. He was so careless and sloppy. He was trying to find the Justice League, but he did so in front of the roommates of his younger self. Looked like a bunch of slackers to me. They look like a bunch of lazy folks to me. So he realizes he's created a world without metas. And so then he realizes, or he discovers, that there actually is a Batman, and he goes to find him. This is where we get the best explanation of what's happening with the movie, because old Bruce Wayne explains to Barry 1 and Barry 2 that time does not work like a splintering effect, does not work like branches. And they made a lot of jokes about how Eric Stoltz was in Back to the Future instead of Michael J. Fox. What Keaton's Batman says, time travel is more like spaghetti. So when you go back in time, you do not create branches, you make yourself a fulcrum. The effects of time travel go in both directions. You change the future and the past, and you end up pointing yourself in a way that's maybe 45 degrees away from your original timeline. And he says, by the time you get through, you get a hot mess. You get spaghetti with all the timelines bended and moldy. And then you have, he said, intersections that you can't avoid. And I guess that was the idea behind fixed points or things that have to happen. It was a bit of a bizarre explanation of time travel. It created time travel rules just to make the plot work. In every timeline, Kara dies because Zod says that Kal-El wasn't the one they wanted. So they completely supplant Superman again and say that it wasn't his DNA that they needed, but they needed Kara's. Okay. Because if you have time travel capabilities, you have as many chances as you need. But in this film, that's what causes the larger problem. But the thing is, he does change something in the past. So it's like he spent all that time telling young Barry to stop doing that. but then he does it anyway to save his dad. So let me get this straight. He allows his mom to die, but he stops his dad from being convicted of her murder. He moves all the tomato cans up to a top shelf. And so when his father picks up that tomato can, he has to look up to get it. And that's when we see his face in the security camera. And that's the evidence used to finally exonerate him of his wife's death. Every single scene in this film is punctuated. It ends with bad humor, slapstick, juvenile, trying to be Joss Whedon, trying to go for snark. But I mean, literally every scene. Even Keaton's Batman is cracking wise, which I did not like. It felt like he broke character to me because Batman is all about mystique and staying in character. But every single scene in this film, when it gets through, it does something goofy. I mean, from start to finish, which leads me to the ending and the cameos. Can't talk about one without the other. This movie is so heavy on member berries and nostalgia bait until it throws in a lot of things. So in this film, we see Adam West, we see John Wesley Shipp as Jay Garrick. Their likeness now, this is all CGI. We see George Reeves, we see Christopher Reeve and Helen Slater as Superman and Supergirl, but all they do is watch the worlds collide as the multiverse begins to collapse in on itself. Wonder Woman makes a cameo in this film with Batfleck, and he was about to lose. He was about to drop someone who was holding poison that was going to hit the water supply of Gotham and kill everybody. And Batfleck was about to drop him, and then Diana shows up, catches him with her magic lasso, and pulls them up. However, they pull the same gag, and the lasso stays wrapped around Batfleck's wrist, and he starts telling the truth. And then he scrambles to try to get it off because he can't stop talking. And Diana says, "Lasso of truth never gets old," and then she flies away. Very last shot is kind of a wink in that Barry did not restore the original timeline because he's talking to Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne pulls up, gets out of the car. He's George Clooney. Lord have mercy. That's literally the final shot. And yes, there is a post-credit scene. The post-credit scene is of a drunk Aquaman, and it makes Aquaman sloppy drunk, and it makes him look awful. It's awful. It's awful. I don't even know why Momoa agreed to such a thing. We do see Henry Cavill, but he's CGI'd and he's part of the time travel shenanigans. So, but I guess that counts as a cameo. And I think the George Clooney Batman is the wink to that was the result, that we get Clooney as Batman again or whatever. And that's literally when the movie goes to the credits and you're sitting there feeling like, what just happened? And that's exactly how I felt when I left the theater. What did I just watch? So in conclusion, I have to say Snyderverse is ending, but it doesn't go out with a bang. It goes out with a whimper. If this review feels incoherent and it feels like a mess to you, it's because the movie was a mess. It gives us glimpses of what could have been, in a larger context, a better film. Because if you're going to do a multiverse film and you're going to bring back dead actors, you're going to bring back Chris Reeve of all people, and you're going to give a nod to everyone that's gone on before, it needs to be a film that's honoring them instead of just using their image to give us member berries and nostalgia bait. Now, don't take away anything from the film that I enjoyed except Sasha Calle and Michael Keaton. And both of them deserved a better film. I'll see you in the next review.